The good old classic all-Amorkian game of fantasy football. In my opinion, one of the better games G-Dubs has ever been responsible for. Now, when it does come to Blood Bowl, there is one major dilemma I face, and that is the fact that, you see, many moons ago, I swore an oath that any game that has dwarves as an option, I swore that I would play dwarves. Unfortunately, in Blood Bowl, dwarves are the equivalent of Magic the Gathering, Return to Ravnica's Standard Era, Blue-White Control, particularly the version with Elixir of Immortality as a win con. That is to say, they can make for some not very fun games. That having been said, that's the person's fault for playing against me, not my fault for being dwarves. Anyways, these are my house rules I've devised for Blood Bowl, at least my house's version of Blood Bowl. It's mostly the living rule book that you can find easily online, with a little bit of the stuff that I like from 2020, which for the most part I do like most of the changes, just not the passing as a new stat. Because I like, why make that more complicated? That even been said, just removing that one change ends up changing a whole lot of the game, or at least every single roster and every single team. My experience with Blood Bowl, I've played like countless hours of the PC version of Blood Bowl 2, and I have like a handful of games under my belt of actual Blood Bowl. But I've read each of the rule books like cover to cover, just over and over, because I like knowing how to play a game when I set it up in front of my friends and whatever. And after looking at all the rules, these are the things that I decided to change. So starting off with the kickoff table, this is nearly identical in each version of the game. Particularly now, I am absolutely in love with the sevens version of Blood Bowl, where instead of 11 players, you just play with 7 players. It's like in almost every single way, I find it just runs more smoothly. There's more interesting decisions. Like there's like a few things that don't work as well, especially just like looking at a pitch. It's much more satisfying to see the 11 on 11 players line up. But in all practicality, I find that sevens works better in like almost every other way. So this kickoff table, a few things are changed to work better with 7 players. So anything, i.e. like defensive shift, that would normally affect a whole team now only affects D3 plus 1 players. For timeout, instead of turn 7 or 8, it's turn 5 or 6, because halves are only 6 turns. And the throw a rock has been replaced with the officious ref. So instead of one of your players potentially possibly dying before the game even starts, at worst, they're just going to be sent off. Assisting block, this is just exactly the same. The only thing that's changed in 2020, I think, is they use the language of marking a player, which I do think makes a little bit more sense. This is just here so that I can print this out and use it as like a quick reference sheet, or I can give it to my, the people I'm playing with. Pre-game sequence, this is more so taken from the 2020 version, where you roll for your number of fans who show up at the beginning of the game. Other than that, it's pretty much the same in every other version. Actually, in the 2020 version of sevens specifically, you now only roll 1d6 for the kickoff. I kept the 2d6 just to, lower the number of touchbacks. Modifiers, these are all from the 2016 version of the game. So generally, I think you get a few more bonuses rather than penalties for things like passing. You get a +1 and then +0 instead of starting off at 0 and then going to negatives for the harder throws. Weather, I think that's almost the same in every version. Injury, I think is just about the same in every version. Touchdown and halftime, I think, is also just about the same in every version. And sevens, you only go to turn 6. One thing I do like from the 2020 version is giving everybody the ability to jump over prone players. So you don't get into this like silly little situation where you can specifically have your, 2 foot tall snotling die in one specific space to prevent your opponent moving over them, which, like, I guess conceivably there's like a little bit of like strategy that's taken away by removing that. But you still have to jump over that snotling, so there's still reason to try to set up like blockades of dead bodies. It's just not a complete brick wall that your like snotling forms over like, whatever agile elf guy that would otherwise be prevented from jumping over them. Go for it. I think that's mostly the same. Fouling. I do like the 2020 rules for the ability to argue the call. Feels very Blood Bowl-y to me, so I like that from 2020. I decided to keep that in. Team rerolls. This is one that I'm not sure exactly which one I want to go with. There are some versions, I think the 2020 new version, they allow you to use however many rerolls per turn, I believe. I might be mistaken on that. I know in the 2016 version, you can only ever use one reroll, one team reroll, I should specify, per turn. But I do kind of like the idea of being able to like use all your rerolls on turn 1, just in case you want to. Just gives you more options. Intercept. The old interception rules are just so strange to me. The fact that like you roll to intercept before the throw is even made, or the pass is even made. It's just like not very straightforward or intuitive at all. The 2020 rules I find are much better. And if you have like, I know this is how like ballistic score works in other G-dubs games. I don't know if I think I saw somewhere in one of the versions of Blood Bowl that if you have like an otherwise impossible agility check, you can attempt to make it if it's like a 7+ by just getting a 6+ and then a 4+. Which, I always do like those, like, the classic like zombie just making an insane play, but it's just extremely rare and very difficult. Turnovers, I believe this is mostly the same. Passing and handoff. I believe in the new Blood Bowl version, there's like the inaccurate pass, and then there's also the wildly inaccurate pass, which, like, I guess I don't like hate it, but I figure just keeping things slightly more simplified where you can, because I like if something's scattering away from another player, like, I don't know if it's worth making the extra distinction of having it scatter that few more squares away. I don't know if the complexity is worth it there, but that's another one I could be convinced to change. Blocking, I think that's just about the same, and the symbols I believe are the same. Now, the advancement table. I think a lot of people liked the 2020 version of advancement, where they basically always let you pick and choose exactly what you want, and each thing just has like a different cost. But the one thing I didn't particularly care for in that version is that it's possible that if you were to just take random skills, you could get a player with a lower value by just getting lucky and having like a bunch of random skills and just happening to get the skill that you want. And because like a random skill adds like plus 10k, and then like a chosen skill adds like plus 20k to the player's value, you could have two completely identical players with the same skills and stats, and if one you just got lucky with, he would just be worth less than the other player, which I don't exactly like that that's possible with the new rules. Um, so I get it, like a lot of people probably don't like the complete randomness of the old set. So I did change this. I don't have it written in this section of the advancement table, but for each advancement that you reach, you get that many re-rolls. So for example, when you become like a superstar, let's say, you would be given the option to re-roll your result 4 times. And then, you have to go with the new result. So, I just, you don't really get that many, like, unless you're playing, like, like on the video game version where you can just grind for days and just multiple matches back to back. You can really play with all your players a whole bunch and, like, just retire the players that aren't working for you and keep the players that actually have the skills that you want. Um, Also, I find like a lot of the time with just this core system, you end up with a lot of players that just are absolutely stacked with a bunch of primary skills, which are generally just like kind of like make for kind of crappy players. Um, so I like the ability of like the farther you get with the player, the more of an ability you have to actually mold them into the star that you want. Especially because in tabletop we aren't playing nearly that much, so I like giving any more opportunity to actually make the players that you want. Star player points, mostly all the same as 2020, except the MVP is the old +5. And instead of just complete random MVP, you choose 3 and then select one with a D3 between them. The deflection and interception, I think, was slightly worded differently, where you get 2 for an interception and 1 for a deflection, but you'd only get one or the other. So, like, I don't know if this new wording is more or less confusing, that if you get the deflection, you get 1 point, and if you also get the interception, you also get 1 point. But I could see maybe, like, the rules working in such a way that you only either ever get the deflection or an interception. I don't know. Like in other places in the interception rules, maybe this is just the way I worded it instead of how it's actually worded in the rule book, but you first have to deflect, and then you can convert a deflection into an interception. All right, so next up are inducements. Now I know the special play cards. These are all from the 2016 version I took the special play cards from. Probably usually not considered very competitive. In fact, I think quite the opposite. But they just, so many of them feel so Blood Bowl-y to me. Like getting an extra teammate or an extra team training, like that could happen in any sport game. But like one of your players bringing a knife onto the field and starting to stab the other players, that can only happen in Blood Bowl, So I really like incentivizing these special play cards, where this is where I think the truly magic of Blood Bowl, this is where the most Blood Bowl-y things come from. I took away some of the other general inducements, like the team training and the wandering apothecary, just so you would have more of an incentive to actually buy the inducement cards instead. I kept Master Chef and Bribe because the Goblin team and the Halfling team have like special rules that actually make these cheaper. so I didn't think it would be very fair to just get rid of those. And like the temp agency sideline staff, I decided to add just because, just in case the TV value is only 20K different, at least you can get some kind of tiny little bonus. Like if your opponent is just ever so slightly more valuable than your team, you can get like a very slight minor bonus, which I think is fine. So sideline staff, I believe in the new 2020 sevens rules, these are 80K your apothecary, and your other staff is 20K. I think like the staff, like apart from the apothecary, obviously, like the coaches and the cheerleaders are just like generally kind of bad. I would only bother like if you like sink money into them, then you're raising the TV score of your team and giving your opponent the chance or more opportunities to get actual inducements that can have a real effect on the game. Whereas all you're doing for yourself is giving yourself a +1 to a possible kickoff event that doesn't even like guarantee you get anything better. Like all it does is you can possibly get an extra reroll under like multiple rolls. Like, it's such a minor thing. I don't think it's generally worth the money. But there is an option. But yeah, the reason I didn't go with like 20K for their price is just because I think they're already like so like minorly useful. And I guess they were trying to scale it up because your whole team is only like half the cost as it would be in Blood Bowl. So, but I don't know. I don't even think anyone ever really bothers with the non-apothecary. But yeah, they're there. So the value increases. These are mostly taken from the 2020 version, actually. I think in 2016, strength is just so insane. I think it's only worth 50K in 2016. But just like anything to make strength slightly less insane. And also the other thing with the value, I believe normally if you get a injury that decreases one of your stats, it doesn't actually affect the cost, which I can kind of see as reason or an incentive to fire your players once they start becoming too injured, because eventually they're just carrying a bunch of injuries and their value is way more than they're actually worth. But I think it makes more sense from a logistical point of view that if a player were injured, their value would be lower. So I like anything that kind of keeps you wanting to hold on to your star players for as long as possible. They should have the ability to get injured and die and all that stuff, but I don't want to add any incentives for you to want to get rid of your star players and replace them with new players. I want people to get their players and stick with them for as long as they can. And maybe this advancement and value increase rules, maybe this makes surviving players like dwarves and undead and such just even better, which they probably don't need. So this very possibly could have been for balancing reasons why they give you incentives to get rid of players, just to make those long-lasting teams, or those teams that have players that last for a long time. Just give them a reason to not keep those players for as long. So, time will tell whether or not, these were bad ideas, but I'm going to test them out, I guess, first. Winnings took this from 2020. I do like the idea of getting money for touchdowns. That's basically the main difference here. So, those high scoring teams that are generally squishy have a better time, replacing their dead teammates because they're scoring more touchdowns, so they have more money to replace their squishy teammates. And this, I do think kind of punishes the, surviving, the long lasting bashy teams that just don't score many touchdowns, so they won't have as much money to work with. Spiraling expenses, I believe this is, well, obviously balanced for 11s, not 7s, but I don't want to punish people for making too strong of a team too quickly. Because I do like having strong teams full of star players running around. I just think it's generally more fun. Kind of like when you have your Mordheim warband that's all super leveled up. Like you would have to go pretty brazy to get your team of 7 dudes up to 2.6 million gold. But I guess it's not impossible. And also, for excess gold, I know in some versions, I think it might even be 150k. In some versions, any excess gold you have adds to your TV. And I don't particularly like the idea of getting punished entirely just for any player trying to save up for anything. If you're just trying to get a Minotaur or you're trying to get another reroll and you have 100k in your bank, if any of your excess gold gets added to your TV, then now your opponent is just straight up getting a 100k inducement just because you're saving up some money. Which, and I get the flip side of that is now in the finals, you can just save up 100k in your bank and then buy your own inducement whenever you want. So I get the flip side of that. Maybe I got to double check the inducement rules. Maybe any amount that you would spend on inducements adds to the other player's petty cash. So if that's not a thing, then maybe I should add that. I haven't considered that, but I think that might have actually already been a thing. Journeyman, just standard rules. Post-match sequence, just here for reference. The casualty table, this is the ye old casualty table, not the D16 from the new one. So I like the big tables, more options. Even if most of them are still literally all the same things, I just think it's more fun to specifically know that your dude got injured with a broken jaw or broken neck or whatever specifically, rather than just, oh, he got a miss next game injury. So these are all the standard sevens rules except for one thing in particular, and that's that I basically give everyone one free reroll, which might there's probably a balance reason why GW didn't give everyone why they made it super hard to get rerolls in sevens. But I find playing just without any rerolls at all is often really kind of annoying. Sometimes you just get a super unlucky turn one and then you've basically just lost the first point. Just you can just get completely screwed over for an entire drive by just one unlucky roll, one unlucky double skulls or something early on. So I like that, I want to give everyone the ability to at least have, the option to not just get double skulled super early on and get absolutely screwed at the beginning of the game. And it's one reroll, so you can just get super duper unlucky and just, double roll, double skulls. And in that situation, then God just wanted you to lose. There's not really anything you can do about that. So yeah, one reroll. I know in the new Blood Bowl sevens rules, You can't even buy rerolls after team creation. I don't know really how many rerolls you would really want to have. I think like most teams, maybe 3, some teams, maybe 4. I guess if I if I changed the team reroll rule to you can now use your rerolls however many times a turn, then you probably just want to like max out on them. Yeah, that's all I've got for the sevens rules. These are just more reference for leveling up, throwing chart. This is the playing card deck conversion for the special play cards. Picture of a dwarf here. Just shout out, never forget. This is just reference for mostly common skills. I think one thing I'm also not 100% sure on. I know a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but a number of skills have changed in the 2020 version. Like I believe shadowing has changed. I think some other skills have changed. Maybe like I think either pro or leader have been changed to be slightly better. And I might go with those 2020 changed versions instead because like basically every single game or every single skill except for maybe block and dodge and or claw, mighty blow, pile on, like anything other than that just always kind of feels bad to ever pick or take. So I like the idea of incentivizing like any other skill other than like those. So just buffing like any other skill. I'm not against that at all. I think I'll have to double check the 2020 skill rules just to see if I want to steal any of them. Now all these previous pages are kind of, I've like designed them in a way that I can print them out and use them as a quick reference sheet. This is just like general like notes, I'll say. So this right here, just a link to the living rule book that I've been using. So this is just the core of the rules for the most part. For the rosters, I believe this is from the like Blood Bowl 2016 version of the game, not the living rulebook version. So you'll see slightly different things. Like halflings. Halflings have the catchers and the hefties. But there's not the 2020 teams like the Black Orcs, which I don't really like the nobility. There's already a bunch of human teams. You can just play Bretonians or humans. I don't really know why they decided to make nobility well, I think I know why they decided to make nobility and Black Orcs their own team, so they could sell more teams or whatever. But if you want to make a Black Orc team, you can mostly just put 4 Black Orcs on a Orc team and you're already there, especially in sevens where I guess it'd be slightly different. You'd have goblins instead of linemen, but I don't know. I don't really, the new teams I don't really care. Specifically, just as have the Black Orcs and the nobility. I don't really care about losing them, but using the old teams. I do like in the 2020 versions they gave halflings as an option to humans, so at least they have that throw teammate potential. And the old world alliance, the old world alliance, I really want to like them because I love dwarves and I want to play dwarves, but I know dwarves are just such an evil, awful, not awful as in bad, but awful as in so unfun to play against team. that I like the idea of Old World Alliance as a not as good dwarf team. But like one of my problems with them is that they might as well just be the human team. Like they're so close to the human team. I feel like they could have, especially if we're playing with the version of halflings as options on the human team, then they're literally just humans with like a few dwarves as options. Which, like, if I'm going to be getting mad at Black Orcs and Nobility, I'm going to be getting mad at Old World Alliance too. But also, it's just like, who wants to play with a team where all your dudes either have animosity or loner? So I do really wish for a dwarf team that's not actually dwarfs and not Old World Alliance. Something in between would be my dream for a dwarf team. So yeah, I made the like changes from the 2020 teams that I immediately noticed. I haven't looked through everything, but I know they gave halflings to humans, and I know in the Old World Alliance they gave you the option of choosing between Tree Man or Ogre, neither of which I think are particularly impactful, but I figured I'd throw them in there as options. This is my draft list, so just instead of the like super non-friendly or non-print friendly versions of all the roster sheets, this one you can actually like print out and not kill your printer because the whole thing is has like a gray background on it or whatever. The only thing I might change, there's technically like a spot missing here if you were to get cheerleaders, assistant coaches, apothecary, and dedicated fans. So maybe I'll throw an extra line in here. I couldn't make it look nice with that, but it's probably a way I could format that. Also, maybe a little bit more room for skills, because sometimes when you get a big guy, you already fill up that entire little space with all the skills that they have. Okay, so this is where I wrote down the advancement re-roll rules. This is like very not tested yet, so I'm sure after some testing I'll have some new opinions on this. I don't know whether or not it's going to be good or not, but I'll find out soon enough. Now, star players, this is probably the one that could lead to some true chicanery, if you will. I don't like the star players just being these pre-made GW yada yada guys. I like the idea of us making our own star players over time. So my idea is like if you fire a star player, i.e. a player with 60 plus star player points, they become like a star player hireable by anyone. So I figure you're probably only ever firing like the bad star players anyways. So giving them or making them like available to everyone, like obviously there is some disgustingness that could occur with this. But this is going to be a long while, I think, before this is ever tested out or before my league reaches the point where we have star players for hire. But I just like the idea of actually having like a connection to the star players that we're hiring, like this being from so and so's team or what have you. But the more I looked in, or like the more I tried to make this work, the more problems I ran into with like, how much should each guy cost, and what about loner? What about these models from different lists that have, like for example, like the halflings have a different treeman than the wood elves. So do I just keep like the treeman if you fire them from a halfling team and then like hire them onto a wood elf team? It gets a little bit messy, so I can see why I don't think this is done. And then that's besides like, oh, let me just play with my dwarf team and get, one Skaven gutter runner on it and just completely break the game, which I think is a very real possibility, but I guess we'll see what happens there. And also with this, there's never really the chance to get Chainsaw Guy unless specifically a Goblin player, which we don't have any of, retires like a loony, which uh, I don't know if that's happening, or how, like, with how easy or how relatively easy it is otherwise to get a Chainsaw Star person. So may like, I don't know how to feel about this, but this is very much so probably the most like experimental part of my whole house rules. I have not tested this at all, so I'm going to guess it's going to end in flames when a dwarf player gets a gutter runner and we realize how awful an idea this is. But I guess we'll find out. So overtime, pretty standard rules. You just go to sudden death, and then if you go to turn 18, then it just ends in a draw. Otherwise, you just go till, if you're in finals or semifinals, you just go till someone ends or someone wins. So playoff, seasons, and tournament rules. These are like pretty standard tournament rules, I would say. The only thing I'm not entirely, or the thing I changed the most, is winnings. So I think that this is the same. You get double winnings in semifinals and finals, which, like, after a while, gold just stops mattering. Like, at least in my experience with playing Blood Bowl 2 on the PC, like, eventually I would just get like so much gold on my teams. Like, I basically just had to like get rid of it because like I didn't have anything to do with it. It was just raising my team value. Which, like, I feel like that's not a situation I really ever want. Like, it's just it doesn't lend itself to that verisimilitude, like, yeah, you should be wanting to, like, if I was a coach, I feel like I should be wanting to make as much money as possible, and there should be something to do with that money. Like, you shouldn't be getting punished for making money. That's like, that's one of like the big problems I want to try to solve with Blood Bowl, because obviously the reason they do that is like, you can't balance the game if someone can have a $5 million in the bank playing against a $2 million team, and then like, I get that balance is the main reason for a lot of the core design choices and not what makes sense. But I'm hoping I can figure out a way to change the game to both have like balance and a making sense factor. So in the finals, I think the recommended, or at least for specifically the Blood Bowl tournament, if anyone plays in the finals, they get +5 SPP. And normally you would get a trophy if you win. Like, the trophies are kind of either just like, they give you a bonus that's either like really good for no additional like TV cost, which is just kind of like, that it's kind of just unbalanced that you can add a bonus to your team not available to anyone else. They even said, like, I do want to give you an incentive to like win and get a trophy. So I just changed this to like, only the winning team gets the +5 SPP. The other team gets just +2. And conceding, the default concession rules are very harsh. Like, if you concede, you just, you don't get MVP. Your opponent gets all the money. It's just like, they really just like kick you into the dirt for conceding, which, like, I get. You shouldn't be, if you concede, you're taking away your opponent's ability to like earn SPP through playing, and you're taking away like the team development and or your ability to get injured if you concede. So I see why they punish it, but I find like in practice, like when one person is in a like position where they want to concede, like neither coach wants to sit there for another, well, maybe like the slightly sadistic coaches want to sit there for an extra like 30 minutes as they just pummel and crush the other player or the other coach when they don't even have a chance of winning. But I think generally I've found like when a player is in a position to concede, like both coaches are kind of like, yeah, let's get this over with rather than just dragging this out. Um, which I think that's another problem that Sevens does a lot to solve, where instead of a game going on for 2 hours and like if in like the first like quarter they're like, oh god, I've already lost because I've just gotten unlucky, and you just look at the turn timer, you're like, oh my god, there's still an hour and a half left in this game that I'm gonna have to suffer through. At least in Sevens the game is only like 45 minutes, so like by the time you already know you're gonna lose, at least there's only like at most like half an hour left to the game. Um, Now a few other things I was considering adding. I'd like the idea of stadiums because I like the idea of having like a money sink for once you hit the point where there's nothing else for your team you want to buy and you're just accruing gold. But I can't come up with any way to like really have a reason to want to invest in your stadium, um like without it either being just like it's either meaningless and you like there's no reason to invest and you might as well just save your money to like for petty cash for inducements, or like it has too much of an effect and like I don't exactly want to set up a situation where dwarf player has whatever like icy blizzard stadium where passing the ball becomes impossible and everyone just has to bash each other, and then it's just like like, well, I guess I got the bad stadium that we're playing on, so I guess I lose. um so yeah, I want to introduce like a money sink, and like I like the stadium as an idea. I have no idea how I want to make that work. um Anyways, I've got pretty high hopes for my league. It's very experimental, these rules. There's a whole lot of things that could go wrong. And I think normally people would recommend like, oh yeah, just try changing like one rule or one or two rules. Whereas I'm changing like a third of the game here and just hoping that none of this conflicts with each other. That's what I like. That's what I think the beauty of the tabletop, you know, game experience is that I can mold and change the rules to exactly what I want. Whereas, if I just wanted to play Blood Bowl like exactly how the book has it written, I'll just go online and play the PC version where I don't have to worry about keeping track of anything and I don't have to set it up, and the whole game is just a million times easier to play. If I'm going to be bothering to set everything up and paint my miniatures and break out the dice and everything, I'm going to try to do things with this version that I cannot do on the online version, which I think, the online version, it's a slightly a shame because I feel like it's so much easier to keep track of anything. The online version is where they really should let you go crazy with the wackiness. And instead, like, I get, it takes time and money to like implement all those weird, crazy, wacky things that, all the Spike journals or Spike magazines have. Um, it's just unfortunate because, like, I want to be able to play with those online because that's where I wouldn't have to be bogged down by having 11 books open and having to keep track of a million different things. the game would just do it all for you. Um, I don't know. It's very sad. But anyways, here's hoping this works out for me. I plan on testing this out in the following weeks and months, and I will make changes accordingly and make an updated version of this from things that I've found are horribly unbalanced. And hopefully, after a while, I will make my perfect Blood Bowl house rules set. So, I'll let you guys know when that is finished. All right. Farewell.